The famous rapper Eminem, and yes, he's in a sermon in church this morning. Eminem has a song called Kings Never Die. It says this: "Here to stay even when I'm gone, when I close my eyes through the passage of time, kings never die." But of course we know kings do die, don't we? Elvis, the king of rock, died at the age of 42. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, died at the age of 50. Martin Luther King Jr. died at just the age of 39. I don't think I realized he was just 39 with all he accomplished. Jesus, of course, died at 33. Kings die all the time. But what if they didn't? Atlantic Magazine asked recently, what would happen if you could bring a famous person back? Who would it be and why? One person said they would want to bring back Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly wasn't the king of rock, but he was considered one of the fathers of rock. Buddy Holly, you may or may not know, died in a plane crash at the age of just 22. Again, I didn't realize he was just 22 with all he had already accomplished. What else could he have written, and how else could he have shaped music, this person asked. Author Thomas Cahill wonders what America would look like today if Robert Kennedy had not been assassinated in 1968. Kennedy, you may know, was favored to win the election in early polls. If Robert Kennedy had not died, Nixon would not have been president, and Watergate would not have happened. Who knows how that would have changed the trajectory of the American government, even to today. Actress Ashley Epstein says she would bring back Walt Disney because Walt Disney brought so much magic and joy into the world. How much we need that magic and joy today, Epstein says. Allison Sweeney, producer, says Lincoln changed the trajectory of our nation's history, and I wonder how much more he could have accomplished had he lived his full term. Martin Luther King, Buddy Holly, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Disney, Lincoln, all kings in their field, and the world might indeed be different had they lived longer. So what about Jesus? What would have happened if his death sentence had been commuted and turned around? How much would things have been different if he lived a full, long life? This week we celebrate 56 years since the John F. Kennedy assassination. Now, Kennedy was no Christ figure by anyone's definition, let's just be very honest. But what would have happened if he'd served his full term? Or even 2 terms? It was his death that pushed people to support his agenda, because his agenda wasn't as supported during his life. It was his memory and the tragedy of his death that pushed people to support a man on the moon by the end of the decade. It was his agenda and his death and his memory that pushed the signing of a civil rights bill under Lyndon Johnson. But the problem is kings do die. And so did Jesus. He died on that cross and rose again at Easter, conquering death and evil. But because of his death and resurrection, Christianity grew to now over 2 billion people throughout the world. And because of his death, we see the world with resurrection eyes. And because of that, our faith is changed. You see, this life is not all there is. We're not bound by or defined by or restrained by what life holds for us. That's our hope. Because of his death, we face our own mortality and the reality of grace that offers forgiveness for things that we've done. Now, not all of us are bold-faced criminals hanging on a cross next to him. I get that. But each of us has done things, hurt people, made mistakes. If we don't admit that, then we're just fooling ourselves and lying, and that's a sin too. Even if we dedicate our entire life to social rights, to righting social wrongs, We've all made stupid choices. And because of the death of Christ, we're a people who remember that through him all things are forgotten and forgiven and given a second chance. Because of his death, those voices and those tapes that play from our past, those things that tell us that we're never going to be good enough or worthy enough because of what someone else has done or said or what we've done or said, those things are wiped away. Because of his death, I think we're also a people who seek and live to right injustice in our world. We cannot be people who simply live for ourselves. We can't be concerned with our own futures. What's best for me and mine is nowhere in the Bible. Let me repeat that to you. Stitch a sampler, get a tattoo, put it on a pillow, whatever you need to do to remember it, people. What's best for me and mine is not in the Bible. That is not a Christian value. Because of his selfless sacrifice, we are called to live selflessly. Henri Nouwen, the Canadian priest who is now of blessed memory, says, "For Jesus Christ, there are no countries to be conquered. There are no ideologies to be imposed. There are no people to be dominated. There are only children, men and women to be loved." To put people above power, to fight for the weak, to give voice to those whose society has silenced. And on this Thanksgiving week, we remember that it's also our job to make safe place at the table for those who've been on the fringes and outcasts. I've said it to you before. When Christ is King of our lives, we begin to realize that if we're not on the margins of society with those looking in, then we've just missed Jesus, because he was never concerned about being with the holy ones, was he? He was more concerned about being with the broken and showing them what it means to be made whole. In his music Christmas lullaby, John Rutter says this: "Where are his courtiers? Who are his people? Why does he bear neither scepter nor crown? Shepherds are his courtiers. The poor are his people. With peace as his shepherd, with love for his crown." Today, on this feast of Christ the King, we come to the culmination of our church year. Everything we began on the first Sunday of Advent last year culminates today. The story of his promised coming, his birth, his epiphany to the world, his resurrection, his death, his ascension, and the gift of the Spirit. All of it comes together today on this day as we celebrate the reality of our faith, as we remember the day in our future when Christ will become victorious over all, lead all of God's people into the throne room of God and lay down the cross one last time and say, "It is finished. Here is your church, exactly as you wanted." On this Christ the King, let us commit ourselves again to the mission and ministry of the crucified one, the sovereign, who conquered death for our sake and who sits at God's right hand in glory, the one who calls us to become his presence for the world. Amen.